21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
As a business consultant for almost 20 years, an independent consultant, author, speaker, but when I'm consulting with clients, I think the number one thing that I found that gets most entrepreneurs and business people in trouble is their ego. And I say that with total respect. I have ego. Pretty much everyone does. Someone said to me at one point in time, it's just a matter of what degree, how much ego we have. But when I'm consulting or speaking or teaching at the university, I always tell people there is a line in the sand. And I want people to get up to about 1/16 of an inch away from the line in the sand on the confidence side. But I never ever want them to cross over that line in the sand to the arrogance side. We can all think, Martin, of people that we worked with, who we didn't really want to be around, we didn't really want to learn from, we didn't really want to approach, we didn't want to communicate with because they were arrogant. And then we can think of the people that we worked for at any stage in our life, where we thought, oh my gosh, I want to be like a sponge. I want to absorb knowledge from this person. I like their attitude. I like being in their presence. They're kind to me. They're sharing their knowledge with me. They're confident. They're certainly confident, but they're not arrogant. And let's face it, when you want a lawyer or a doctor, a surgeon, a business consultant, a podcast producer, whatever it is, you want someone who knows what they're doing and can exude that level of confidence so you know you're in the right place, you've picked the right person, but arrogance never works. And again, I hope I don't offend anybody when I say this, but usually when I run into certain C-level people, CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, whatever the case may be, sometimes they've been in business so long, they really think they know everything. And my tech friends have always said to me, think of your brain like a computer mounted on top of your neck. We've used about 15% of that brain's capability. The other 85% is wide open. Yet every day I meet people, every week, every month, who say, I'm done learning. You can't teach me anything. I've always done it this way. I'm the only one who can sell my product. I'm the only one who can sell our services. I started this company from the ground up. No one can do it like I do. And to me, that's ego. The unfortunate part of that is, especially in the entrepreneurial world, those people rarely take time off. They're working 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week because, quite honestly, I think they don't trust other people around them to do some of those tasks. So I really think that's the number one issue. People get in their own way. And, I've always thought the role of a leader in an organization is to move barriers so productive teams can do the work and move through. But I see a lot of leaders who are constantly jumping back into the management trenches to do the work that they hired people to do that they're supposed to trust. And so there's a lot of internal tension there. But yeah, I think the number one challenge, you could say it's money or profitability. Sure, those things are challenges, but we create a lot of challenges for ourselves as business people, just having egos that are a little bit out of control. Sometimes people ask me, how did I get to be an author? Or why did I write a book? And quite honestly, I was lazy, and that was my excuse. I waited about 10 years to write a book, and I really couldn't get my arms and my mind around what was the book going to be about. And literally, Martin, just like a movie, I woke up one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was there. And I grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil, and I started writing. And I thought, well, as I said earlier, many people fail in business or are not as successful as they care to be because of these convenient excuses that they conjure up and perpetuate. So I literally wrote down 13 excuses that I repetitively hear from people or companies or organizations. And then I rank them in the order that I typically hear them in, or the ones I hear the most through the least. And as I mentioned earlier, the title of my book, We Tried That Once, and Other Popular Excuses That Sabotage Business Success. And so I've dedicated one chapter in the book to 13 different excuses. So 13 chapters, and some people said to me, oh, you don't want to do that. 13 is not a lucky number. I said, 13 is a great number. We're sticking with it. And I probably didn't write the way a lot of traditional authors write. I didn't block out time every day to write. I really wrote when thoughts came to me. And sometimes I'd be out walking with my wife and our children, or I'd be in a meeting and I would get a thought and take notes. And quite honestly, I was a little bit nervous because I had about a 3-month stretch of time where I didn't write a word. It just wasn't there, and I didn't want to force it. And when I looked at the books in the marketplace, and of course there's hundreds of thousands of business books in the marketplace, I thought, geez, the books I've read, the books I have in my library at home, I have a lot of books where I read 1 chapter, 2 chapters, and I stopped because it just wasn't working. Or the next 6 chapters repeated the first 1 or 2 chapters. And it seemed to be, there was like a mentality out there that said, well, you got to write a book that's at least 300 pages long. And when I met with my publisher, he said, you write what you want, and when you're done, you're done. And quite honestly, my book is 66 pages long. I kind of thought of it like the book Who Moved My Cheese, short, sweet, to the point, 13 chapters addressing 13 excuses, how to get around those excuses. In totality, I think there are 106 action items in the book. And so I say to people, if you can't pull 1 pearl out of 106, then, you might not be trying, or maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am, but I put out 106 action items in the book. And so as a consultant, it works out well for me. Selfishly speaking, if I'm out speaking about the book, I can usually land a consulting client. If someone doesn't want to hire me as a consultant, I say, do yourself a favor, spend $25 for the hard copy, buy the book. There's 106 solutions in there. My book is available in hard copy and in ebook format in Kindle. But that's it's been a great positioning tool for me. It's been a great springboard. Truth be told, a lot of people write and a lot of people journal. But when you take the population of the world, only 5% of the world's population are published authors. And it's still a crowded lane, but I'm happy and pleased to say that I'm in that lane. People ask me, of course, the next natural question is, are you going to write another book? Not ready. It would be certainly a number 2 in the series of just more excuses that I hear as a consultant. But I think I've got a lot yet to yield from this first book. I'd like to drill down into a little bit more detail. One of my affiliations is with the State University of New York at Buffalo and their Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, and I've been associated with them for 18 years. So I've met dozens upon dozens of entrepreneurs. And usually every fall, we sit 2 classes of 20, so 40, 45 entrepreneurs. And it always unrolls the same way every fall. The chiropractor is sitting next to the florist, who's sitting next to the plumber, who's sitting next to the surgeon, who's next to the electrician. And they look at each other on the first night and go, geez, maybe I'm in the wrong place. I'm not sure how these people can help me. And 20 minutes later, when they start discussing their challenges, they find out very quickly that their challenges are pretty much identical. Their silo might be different. They might be family-owned, publicly traded, privately held. They might have 2 employees or 22,000 employees, but at the end of the day, those those challenges seem to come back to people, process, policy, procedure, profit, or lack of all of the above. So, one of the most glaring things I typically see, and thank goodness people are willing to admit it, and quite honestly, I used to live in that world myself 25 years ago, is a lot of entrepreneurial people take their passion and their interest and their talent and they morph it into a business. And they'll go to the bank probably and get the bank very excited about that business. And the bank buys in. And then that entrepreneur goes back home, to the office, to the factory, wherever it may be, and they find out that the day-to-day nuts and bolts of running that business is very, very different from having an idea and giving that business a life. And they also get somewhat distracted because many of the entrepreneurs I know, myself included, perhaps yourself, Martin, we're halfway through the first idea and we're already on to the next one. So the management, the leadership, the ownership, the strategy of running that first company is kind of a pain in the side to a lot of entrepreneurs because they're on to the next idea. But with that said, I think probably the biggest challenge, the biggest flaw that I've met in entrepreneurs, and quite honestly, very established business people as well, is their lack of financial acumen. I'll walk into a business and I'll say, okay, how do you make money? And they usually look at me and go, well, we write and we sell greeting cards, or we build tractors, or we provide human resource services. And I'll stop and say, no, I didn't ask you what you do. I asked you how you make money, how that revenue drops through the expenses and lands in the bottom line as profit. And a lot of them look at me and go, I don't know. I know what we make. I know what we do. And they don't understand revenue streams. They don't understand that they probably have 50, 60, 70 times as many expenses as they do in their personal household budget. They don't understand an income statement, a cash flow, a balance sheet. Some of them have never even seen them. But they'll say to me, well, I have a chief financial officer who does that, or I have a controller who does that. And I always say, that's fine. I understand that. But as the owner, as the C-level person, you need to understand that better than anyone else because this is your company. And the good news about a lot of entrepreneurial programs all over the world are that they attack and they address the financial piece. And once people understand how they make profit, they usually change their business or their behaviors. We used to live in a world that said bigger's better, sell more. Not necessarily the case, because with bigger, getting bigger brings more overhead, more expense, potentially more stress, maybe the need to hire more employees, perhaps the need to have more customers, and not all of those customers are great customers. So I always say there's a sweet spot for businesses where you're in the right zone, you're making a decent living, and there's granted, you have to think about the motivation behind being a business owner. Are you running a business as a lifestyle so you can live a decent life and maybe create some legacy for your relatives or your children? Are you running a business and building a business with the sole intent of someone buying it from you someday and you're setting it up, to look really nice and pretty and financially attractive? So there are different motivators. But quite honestly, most of the people I met who are entrepreneurs do not get out of bed every day and say, I woke up today so my business could lose money. Now, I get it. There are lost leaders inside of companies. There are lost divisions inside of companies. And that loss is made up in some other division. But most people don't go into business to lose money. So the better people understand money and finance and cost control. I hate to say it's simple, Martin, but it's really simple. To get a better bottom line of profitability, you either have to increase revenue, decrease expenses, or do both at the same time. But the reality is many business owners don't monitor that closely. Or I'll ask some questions like, well, what's the norm? What's the normal profitability level for your industry? And they won't know. And they'll say, well, how do I find out? And I'm like, well, you can Google that information. Some of them don't take into account the fact that they might have global competitors and they're only seeing a 5-mile radius around their business. And that's all they think about are those competitors. Some people wake up every day with a great idea and they're totally unaware of the fact that halfway around the world, that idea has already been in place. There's a business built around it. There's a trademark on it. There's a patent on it. And they go down a path that ends up not bearing them any fruit. To that point, I think maybe the second largest challenge I see when we dive in with business people and entrepreneurs is not really knowing how to distinguish between a real opportunity and a distraction. And rest assured, most CEOs that I meet, or I'll speak to them in airports, once they sit next to somebody on a plane and they have a conversation, they come back home with another, oh, we have to do this. We have to build this, try this, buy this, sell this. And my job is to sort of slow them down and say, okay, let's just run that idea through a filter. Do we have the time to do it? Do we have the capital to do it? Do we have the intellectual horsepower to do it? Do we have the actual physical space? If it's a product for inventory, do we have marketing for this idea? Do we have the right network, the right connections? Is there any proven market demand where we live or where we're going to sell? But a lot of people get excited because something sounds cool and it sounds like fun, and we all like fun, myself included. But when you sort of peel back those layers, especially when we're talking about dedicating resources of time, effort, energy, money, people, we have to make sure we're aiming those things in the right direction, or we're going to bleed ourselves dry and make ourselves exhausted. Let's take QVC as an example. There's thousands of products on QVC. They've been around, I'm guessing, 40 years. They have their own ginormous campus in Pennsylvania, but they have their own legal, their own research, their own sales, their own marketing. They know that if I take a phone and I bring it to their program, how many I should sell per minute. Sales per minute is their only metric, their key metric, sales per minute. And they will tell that vendor, if you hit this number, we're going to dance. If you don't hit this number, have a nice day, take all your stuff and probably go back home. And then that's a little bit of a more condensed version than it should be or could be. But I've met people who get excited about opportunities like that and haven't really stepped back to say, let's say we had a really good day and we sold 1 million phones. Could we actually produce them and ship them without getting in trouble or getting blown up on social media by people who said, hey, I ordered this phone 7 months ago and I still don't have it? So I think when business people look at real opportunities versus distractions, and sometimes think about some of the greatest inventions or the things people have paid the most money for in the recent years, they're not overwhelmingly different ideas. They're subtle tweaks on ideas that are already out there. I mean, how many versions of the iPhone are there? The public is finally going, okay, my 10 works as good as a 16. I'm not going to pay $2,000. Okay. A lot of times it's not rocket science. A lot of times it's listening to the public. And when the public says, I wish your product could do this, if we can make that twist, we're still in business. So I'm encouraging listeners and viewers to look very carefully at what you think you want to do, what you're currently doing, if there's a bridge there, if there's too many barriers there. And believe me, I'm not saying get stuck in the habits you've had for 50 years. I'm all about change, but it's got to be strategic. It has to be measured. It has to be planned. And quite honestly, I also think we have to set up a budget in the beginning and a timeline. And if we get to that timeline and we exhaust that budget and we haven't reached the level of success we want, we have to be honest enough with ourselves to say, okay, we're shutting this project down. Because I've seen some companies put themselves out of business chasing a dream that's just not a reality. Hopefully we've evolved to a place in our world where it's not just about business. It's just not about money. It's just not about profit. And I've always said, no matter how technologically advanced we get, including artificial intelligence, every single day, we are still people dealing with people. And I think that's what drove me to be a consultant. I think that's what drove me to write a book with helpful tips. It's what role could I play to potentially influence one person in the world to end up being a little bit happier, being a little bit more productive, being a little bit more satisfied, being a little bit more confident. And at least in the United States and in North America, I know one thing to be true. If we look at the number of hours we're awake and alive, we don't do anything more than we work. We don't sleep more, we don't eat more, we don't vacation more. We're a working society. And sometimes people look at me strangely when I say, I hope you love what you do because you're spending so much time there. My passion, I think you can tell I have it, is for helping people at the end of the day. How I help them is through consulting and speaking and writing. But I never feel like I'm working because I love what I do. And I think it's incumbent on our current generation of leaders. We need to raise the next generation of leaders. They're not going to learn everything just being near us or hearing us or reading the employee handbook. We have to grow that next generation of leaders, especially in the post-pandemic world we're living in. Gen Zs and millennials, they make up the largest percentage of the workforce right now. They have a different way of thinking than baby boomers and older members of the working class society. And it's all good. No one, I think, is a threat to anyone if we learn how to put a team together and live and work in harmony. But I think businesses now more than ever need a social conscience. They have to not only employ people in the communities where they're based and pay taxes in the communities and the municipalities where they're based. They have to contribute above and beyond that. People have to know. And I can name countless examples where I live in Western New York State of some major companies that are always leading the charge to make the community a better place, to make it safer, to make it cleaner, to make it prettier, to support hospitals and foundations and research and grants. And I think that's incumbent in some way, shape, or form upon everyone. I have a daughter, my wife and I have a daughter with a developmental disability. She was born with Down syndrome. We care about causes like that. We pay attention to those things in the world. Sometimes it's as simple as just a kind word. You see someone, you can tell they're a little bit dejected. You give them a pat on the shoulder, you look them in the eye and say, hey, I hope you have a great day. Maybe that's all they need. But, if we're just sort of robotic and transfixed, we can't do that. We have to pay attention to who is around us, what is around us. I guess it's a super high level of emotional intelligence. Some people have it, some people don't. I believe we can all develop it, but we just can't go through life sort of with our blinders on robotically. We all know the right thing to do. We were all born with 3 great tools in our bodies when we drew our first breath: our hearts, our brains, and our guts. And quite honestly, we have to get back to trusting our guts. We still have to listen to our hearts, and we have to develop that 85% of our brain that I mentioned earlier. It pretty much goes untapped most of our lives because there's a lot of capacity up there. And I always, sometimes when I speak at conferences and conventions and I talk about leadership, I'll say to people, are you a real leader? Or are you just a person in a position of authority? I'll ask them to think about, do people follow you because they want to, or do they follow you because they have to? I also ask them to think about, how do people feel in your presence? How do you make people feel? Not as employees, not as coworkers, not as associates, as human beings. And then the last thing I like to ask people, which usually makes them fairly uncomfortable, is what do people say about you when you're not in the room? When you walk away, when you're not at the table, what's the conversation about you like? And sometimes we have to soul search and reflect and make adjustments, not only so we can be better leaders, but so we can be better people and better members of society. My promise to people has always been and will always will be, if it's a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, or 10 years from now, if you reach out to me, as long as I'm alive, I will get back to you. I will get back to you, I promise. And I met some people 7 years ago speaking at a convention or a conference who reached out one day and said, hey, can I bounce this idea off of you? So I'm inviting all of the viewers and listeners to reach out to me whenever they want to, whenever they need to. Email is easiest. My email is leadershiplarry@gmail.com. I have multiple websites, but my main website is speakingofstrategy.org. I have a website for my book. That's WeTriedThatOnce.com. And I've been on LinkedIn forever. So LinkedIn is great. Meet a lot of fabulous people there, have a lot of great conversations there. Just throw me in that search bar, Larry Mietus in LinkedIn, and we will connect. And my promise again, I will respond to every single person who reaches out. We're all in this to help each other out. It's that simple. Sometimes people say, oh my gosh, you're a consultant. There's a million consultants out there. Maybe there are, but tomorrow there'll be 1,000,001 and there's still room for everybody. Let's look out for each other. Let's be good to each other. Let's take care of each other.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.